Okay, good morning, everyone. A good weekend, and we're going to, in fact, it probably was over yesterday, and we're going to have a great week. I now have the pleasure of announcing to you that on a week from Wednesday, April 25th, Meta is having an open house near our office here, the First Congregational Church, and you're all invited, and bring your friends, especially wealthy ones, and next week I'll actually start talking to you about who's going to be coming so we can get the right amount of food and so forth, but there's going to be music, food, and inspiration, latter partly provided by you. The box that I told you about that was on our shelf that had resources for 164B seems to have walked away. So I'm just going to be bringing stuff in as it comes across my desk in hopes it'll be useful for us to take the pulse of what's going on in nonviolence around the world. This is Peace News, which is a British magazine, newsletter, and it will show you that there is a lot of resistance to every level, every aspect of militarization / globalization from above / slash and burn going on probably more actively in the UK than it is in the US right now. I'm not sure about the rest of Europe, but this will give you a sense of what's going on over there in that newspaper. And one other resource I want to share with you, and that is that the Progressive magazine has an interview with Gene Sharp. So he's I almost said godfather, but grandfather of peace research. Okay, now still on the resource category, I mailed you all by CourseWeb a longish article by Marisa Handler, who is a very good San Francisco-based writer and singer. And she had spent a lot of time with the Sarayaku in Colombia. I think it was Colombia. Venezuela, Colombia, somewhere around there. And I wanted you to look at that in some detail as an example of the ad hoc resistance movements that are springing up all over the world as the globalization machine gets in the face of indigenous people. And you find varying degrees of nonviolence being practiced there. And in this particular case, there was an interesting example for us to look at. It's very much in the gray area, where these soldiers came to impose their program. It was mostly about oil exploration. They're going to set off explosives in the jungle to test what's going on under the ground and those other things. So there's plenty of room around here. And they were confronted by women from the village with spears who took these men into custody and took their guns away, and then gave them a long speech and gave them their guns back, by which time they were converted enough to where they didn't use those guns. So it's a sort of tempting situation, but of course it's using wrong means. Even though you don't intend to carry through with them, you're not actually planning to spear these guys. I assume they weren't planning to do that, but they were definitely using threat power in order to contain the threat that they were posing so that they could then move on to persuasive means. So I mean, you read something like this and you want to just say, yes, this is the way to do it, but it is dicey. For one thing, as Marisa points out, the soldiers were very much outnumbered by these women with spears. If they were not, then you'd have a different situation. So again, I leave you with this very uncomfortable ... Don't know quite what to say about this, but I warned you in the beginning, this is PAX 164B. There'll be a lot of gray areas and a lot of ... because we're dealing with the real world now. Yeah. On the whole, I would say, yeah, it's better to do a gray area action than to do nothing at all. It will be very, very rare that what the situation will call for is passivity and doing nothing. And at best, you'll end up losing the initiative, and that's always bad for nonviolent actors. So I guess what we're talking about here is people who did a gray area thing. That's interesting, Artie. I'm going to mention an example that was very close to doing nothing at all that worked out rather well, actually, when I finished the sentence. But knowing me, I might never finish the sentence. It just goes on and on, all these parentheses. I guess what we would say about these villagers is that whatever they did and whatever kind of weapons they displayed, they did it with the right intention. Their intention was to block the aggression and then use the space thus created to do persuasion. So we have to give them a lot of credit for that. If your intentions are good, even if you're packing an 11-foot spear or whatever it was they had, that's going to count for a lot, that your intentions are good. We're not actually relying on the weaponry. But after all is said and done, I'm arguing out of both sides of our mouth here. After all is said and done, that's the language that the soldiers understood. It's a lot like the stone throwing in the Israeli-Palestine situation. It can't actually do a whole lot of damage, though there has been one person who lost his eye in the course of all these years. Most of the time it cannot do a lot of damage, but it's a form of defiance, and that's any day better than passivity. Okay, I actually finished the sentence. Hold on to your question, Mike. The example I was going to use is a very old one. It comes from the 18th century, and it's in this wonderful book called Christian Non-Resistance Explained and Defended by Aidan Ballou, which is one of the early old classics on nonviolence. And he tells a story in there about the Sandwich Islanders, who were regarded by the French as their colony. The French imposed a liquor tax. The islanders refused to pay the tax, pointing out, and it is rather logical, that they weren't drinking any French liquor, so why should they pay a tax on it? But that wasn't logical enough for the colonial mentality, and a gunboat of French Marines comes to the island. The people turned to their king and said, what shall we do? And he said, physical resistance would be ridiculous. We have nothing but sticks and stones, and they have these modern, sophisticated flintlock rifles that can fire a round every 2 minutes, and bayonets and all the rest of it. So let's not try to fight them. Let's not get in their way at all. Let's pretend that they're tourists. And so that's what they did. The Marines landed and said, méfiez-vous, watch your step, which is the French Marines. And they said, hello, how are ya? And there was a fort on the island. I don't know who had built that fort. The Marines said, we are going to attack this fort. The islanders said, comme vous voudrez, it's up to whatever you want to do. So they felt good because they attacked the fort and burned it and came away doing the Grey Lag Goose dance. We triumphed, we triumphed. So their ego was gratified. They never did anything to the islanders. They hurt nobody. They collected no taxes. And it was considered in the early days a very good example of nonviolent resistance, which was pretty close to doing nothing. But normally it's much better, as Gandhi would say, if you really have a choice between violence and cowardice, go for violence. You can grow, you can convert, evolve from violence into nonviolence. You cannot get to nonviolence from cowardice. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, Paolo.
You can go to nonviolence.
Yeah, that's right. You weren't here in 164A. If you are a coward, and you know who you are, all cowards, raise your hands, please. If you are a coward in a given situation or in a given relationship, you will not be able to exhibit nonviolence in that relationship. And actually, there are some startling examples where you would be better off fighting back with whatever you got, because you can get from there to the renunciation of weapons, but you can't get to the renunciation of weapons from the non-possession of weapons. You don't have anything to fight back with. You got nothing to give up. So the anecdotal example that I used last semester was someone wrote to Gandhi and said, a bully slapped me on the face. It probably was the same bully that you used to see in these comic books who were always attacking people on the beach and taking away their girlfriend. And this was an advertisement for Charles Atlas bodybuilding course, which I was sorely tempted as a scrawny teenager to sign up for, but could not afford it. Anyway, where was I? A bully slapped me. I felt humiliated. What should I have done? I did nothing. And Gandhi wrote back and said, you should have slapped him right back. But he added, why did you feel humiliated? You know, it was his problem. He's the idiot who goes around slapping scrawny teenagers or whoever it was. Why should you feel humiliated? But once you've gotten yourself into that subordinate position, you really have to get out of that before you can do yourself or anybody any good. So, yeah, Mike? So we have three positions here. Feel humiliated but do nothing about it. That is tamas on the three guna scale. Tamas, inertia; rajas, restless activity; sattva, balance, harmonized energy. Like that. Let's talk about covering a lot of ground in a set of parentheses. The lowest possible situation is to feel humiliated and not do anything. Better feel humiliated and act however you can in that situation, with your resources very limited. Act however you can to restore your dignity as a means of offering dignity to the other person. Alay Dengel. And best thing would be not to have felt humiliated in the first place. Then you could come back in some appropriate way and say, are you having some kind of problem with my cheek in the way of your hand, or something like that. Yeah. So what was your earlier question? What was that? Yeah, that's right. So it was in that sense a nonviolent response. Because it was like the Rosenstrasse prison demonstration. The women who came and got in the face of the Gestapo did not have overpowering weaponry. They just used the weaponry. They had nothing. But this is, as I say, this is like the stone throwing in the Palestinian situation, because you're using something to demonstrate your resistance and your unwillingness to accept the subjugation that's being imposed on you. You're not doing this in order to harm. Not really. Shannon? Yeah. Yes, I mean, that'd be very different if you say, okay, hand in your weapons and line up against the wall. Now we've got your AK-47s or whatever it is. That was very different. But if you're using, this is getting more and more interesting the more we think about it. You're using threat power to disarm threat power. So there's this very slender area in which you can actually do what Ronald Reagan and Reaganites say is the only thing that you can do to get to peace, which is peace through strength. Peace through strength. You use your threat power to disarm opposition. As soon as you've got them disarmed, you say, let's talk. And they're impressed by your courage and by your compassion that you're not attacking them when you have a position of advantage. And so you've created a platform where you can carry on the conversation by normal conversational means. So this is the kind of thing which I normally say does not exist, and I still say as a generalization that'll work, but there are these really slender areas where you can use threat power of a kind to disarm threat power by people who are committed to it because they see no alternative, and then talk to them about an alternative. So first Joe and then Matt.
I was going to say that Gene Roddenberry, the creator of Star Trek, he actually plays a lot with this idea in Next Generation, which I've heard a lot of times.
Of course not.
The idea of using force,
yeah.
threat power, to then create a situation where conversation, where
right.
some kind of transformative experience is possible is really kind of the core of that show.
Yeah, which is why I say that it's a gray area within a gray area. I mean, that show has, I've had a lot of trouble with it, and I've become very unpopular with Trekkies, which is a very uncomfortable situation to be in. But yeah, it takes, you see how long it's taken us to get to this question from a position where we could discuss it intelligently. And I thought this was a very intelligent discussion up to now, incidentally. So to think that you could start with those situations right away with people who know nothing, which is to say ordinary human beings living in an industrial civilization, absolutely clueless about nonviolence, it won't work because they think it's the only way. I think I've shared with you that I came up with the slogan during the Reagan era, strength through peace, which I thought was really terrific and stood a lie on its head and made it turn out being truth. And what was it? I wrote an op-ed called Strength Through Peace. Op-ed was accepted by some fairly considerable newspaper, the Weehawken Gazette Daily or something like that. And so I eagerly rushed to the stands to see myself in print, and there was the title, Peace Through Strength. You see what I'm saying? If you do something a little bit abnormal, people will turn it into what is for them normal. So to use this argument early on in the conversation that we can use threat power to get people into a situation of conversion is dangerous. I guess thinking about it now, one of the few places I would say that it has to be applied is in criminal justice. You have people running around committing crimes. The peace officers do not approach them with their little wallet-sized nonviolent communication card in their hand and say, are you having some kind of a problem? What are your real needs here? No, you have to, slam them up against the police car, handcuff them with their hands behind their back, all that stuff. Get them into a situation where you can then apply rehabilitation and you can restore their dignity, their sense of self-respect in that situation. That would be a case where I think you would have to, because of the lateness of the stage of the conflict and because of the danger to other people for whom you are responsible, if you're a peace officer, that's your job, is to apply threat power to bring about a situation where you can have conversation. Unfortunately, what we do is once we've applied the threat power, we just say, well, we're on a roll. Let's keep these guys in little cages now. Hang on one second, Shannon. Matt? It's embarrassing as far as Nagler's Law is concerned. It kind of puts Nagler's Law on the shelf. Let's see if by using clever rhetorical maneuvers we can rescue some kind of a reconciliation here. Mike, you?
I don't think it's fair to do it. I mean, like, it works out there. Like, when you go on that threat power, it's still just massacre them.
Well,
based on
no, I think we've already said that you can't take what these women did and institutionalize it. You can't plan to use it in other situations. What we're only talking about is, given their situation, what they did worked. And here's a clever rhetorical argument that I had up my sleeve. Again, we go back to the question of intention. It wasn't so much threat power. This is maybe what you're saying, Mike. It wasn't all that threatening. Though, as Marisa points out, the soldiers were outnumbered, and that was part of it. It wasn't all that threatening to be surrounded by women with spears. I hope that doesn't come across as a sexist remark, or a pre-Amazonian consciousness here. So really, it was more a display of refusal to be subjugated than it was a threat. So in that sense, we would say, and really this is getting so cagey that I'm not sure I would really want to argue this in public, but we're just here in this small, privileged environment with people watching all over the world, getting emails from Somalia and Isfahan places. But just entre nous, if you stick with intention, you stay on that level, it isn't even really a violation of Nagler's law because it's not really violence. It's a demonstration of refusal to be subjugated. Very tricky. Don't plan on it. Don't make strategic manuals based on this. It's too subtle a point. You cannot use it in the early stages of your conversation with your relatives or your roommates or people that you meet in the library. Shannon? Oh, excuse me, so 1 second, Shannon. By the way, if you have friends who want to watch the webcast or are in any other way intelligent, hip, and sophisticated, alert people, you can now go directly onto metacenter.org, and the last semester and this semester are just clickable right through. Okay. Shannon? Yeah. Isn't that clever? Go ahead. Yeah. 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 Okay, I hang on a minute, Ari. I like this very much, that what you're doing is using threat power for disarmament, not for reciprocation. Unfortunately, as we know in the real world, 999 times out of 1,000, your threat power is interpreted as reciprocation, and it has exactly the opposite effect. So we're talking about a rare situation, possibly because it's women, because their weapons are so outclassed. They're demonstrating their vulnerability. You know, it's like that thing we saw from the Philippines. Look, this is the most that we've got. It's ridiculous, but it's what we've got, and we're going to use it until you guys come around. Has everybody got this, by the way? Okay, this is going to be okay. We'll get back to that. Okay, I hope this has gone out over the airwaves. Yeah. John Lindsay Poland's talk got almost this complicated. I was impressed. During the Cold War, there was a program that was put forward. It was called GRIT, which was a very good acronym. It appealed to just the right people, the kind of people who go around beating up scrawny teenagers on the beach. And what it stood for was Graduated Reciprocal Initiatives in Tension Reduction. And the way it worked was, okay, you have these two moronic superpowers pumped up on testosterone, squared off against one another, laying waste to the entire global economy. What should they do? Well, one option was to disarm. I remember being at a talk with Helen Caldicott, the famous Australian doctor who started Physicians for Social Responsibility, and she said, what do you think the Russians would do if we disarmed? And the audience was stunned for a while, and somebody raised his hand and said, I think they'd be impressed. So we weren't calling for that with GRIT, but you make one step in the direction, like we're going to disarm all of our faulty multiple re-entry hydrogen bombs. Okay, we're just going to do it on our own hook. And you wait for them to reciprocate. And they say, okay, we're going to scuttle 2 of our submarines. Something that seems to be happening automatically now anyway. And then you do another one, which is a little bit bigger, and they do another one, and you do exactly what Shannon was talking about. You build trust by building down your threat power. So this is like the ideal way to go about it. You know it's the ideal because nobody did it. Anything intelligent was not to be adopted in that era. Pardon my cynicism. But if you can't do it this way because you're not an answering superpower with the same level of strength, you do what you can do. So I think we're getting somewhere with this. It was, let's see, who else was it? Matt? Did you have something else? You went right. Oh, that's right. Ashley.
Well, yeah, I kind of felt like the use of women in this kind of situation was slightly symbolic.
Uh-huh.
In the sense, like,
Well,
it kind of forces them to realize the vulnerability
yeah.
of women. And I know we talked about like how symbols you have to
Yep.
at all costs, but it seems like,
Yeah.
I don't know, to me
Uh-huh.
that's symbolic. Like, it was used to be as, you know, to show vulnerability.
I don't think of women as symbols. I'm teasing, I know what you mean. But what they were embodying was physical vulnerability and spiritual strength. And I think that's kind of the perfect combination. That's why Gandhi said, when the New Age dawns and we've got nonviolence all over the place, women will be playing an even more prominent role. Right. Okay, Mike, Arby, and Marisa.
Maybe it's just my mental image, but like I know these women with big spears, like Pokemon. Were they like big spears or like little sticks?
I'm really weak on Sarayaku weaponry, and I couldn't tell you, but I think I remember in Marisa's article that they showed up with these things upright. So that's very different. We've got these things, okay, we have a certain vulnerability, but we have a certain pride, and we're asking you to respect both. In a way, that was a tension-reducing mechanism. It's not like they threw a volley of spears over the hill and then came out and say, now let's talk. Are we?